The Hakka have had a significant influence, disproportionate to their smaller numbers in the course of Chinese and overseas Chinese history, particularly as revolutionary political and military leaders. So some famous Hakka you might have heard of before are Sun Yat-sen, who is the founder of modern China. He was the first president of the Provisional Government of the Republic of China in 1912. Also Lee Kuan Yew, the founding father of modern Singapore, the first prime minister of Singapore, and he stayed as prime minister from 1959 to 1990. In 1997, he said, "Fortunately for me, I have a very high threshold for pain. I am a Hakka. Hakka can take a lot of pain. So, I survived." His daughter, Li Wei-ying, in 2015 said, "And I nearly broke down, but I won't break down. I am a Hakka woman. So farewell, Papa. I will miss you. Rest in peace and be as tough as Hakka come." This is Zhang Fakui, Commander-in-Chief of the Republic of China Army. He said in 1980, "The Hakka are able to mold outstanding military men. Their hard-working conduct having been developed through years of arduous livelihood in the mountainous regions. Praises of the Guangdong spirit by the Japanese actually refer to the Hakka spirit. A big majority of the officers and soldiers in the Guangdong army are Hakka. The distinguished successes of Hakka military men have been attested by the modern history of China." Li Tenghui, the president of Taiwan, in 2000, he said, "All of you should know that I, Li Tenghui, am a Hakka. Many of mainland China's leaders are also Hakka. Hakka people are brilliant, aren't they?" Sun Huifeng, granddaughter of Sun Yat-sen, she says, "My grandfather is Hakka. The origin of Hakka is at the Central Plains. A Hakka cultural center is opening in Jiangdong Economic Center. I will be unveiling a statue of my grandfather in the cultural center to promote Hakka spirit." Next we have Thaksin Shinawatra, the Prime Minister of Thailand. "There is an important piece of experience not found in books, that is Hakka people. Fine moral qualities in doing business based on integrity. This is the most precious legacy left behind by my Hakka forefathers." Finally, we have Tsai Ing-wen, the president of Taiwan, in 2011. "Hakka spirit in my blood has been calling me to take the challenge and shoulder the responsibility of being president, like numerous Hakka women have done for the past hundreds of years." And so she was one of the first female presidents of Taiwan. When Hakka meet each other, and they don't know who the other one is, but they find out, "Oh, you're a Hakka as well," they say, Zijiaren, which means that we're all the same in the Hakka family. There's also a saying among the Hakka, "Wherever there is sunshine, there are Chinese. Wherever there are Chinese, there are Hakka." The Hakka population in Taiwan is about 4.6 million. They're about 15 to 20% of the population of Taiwan. The practice of foot binding, which was popular among the Chinese, was not adopted among the Hakka. They did not bind their feet. Zhang Guofan, a Qing general who was not Hakka, he called the Hakka females big-footed hillbilly witches. That was his ethnic slur for them. In 1934, when the nationalist army drove the communists out of coastal China, the communists began the Long March with 86,000 soldiers. Now, of those 86,000 communist soldiers, more than 70% of them were Hakka. That's no coincidence. On the other side of the nationalists, the general there was Zhu Yu, who himself was a Hakka. So you had Hakka on both sides. And during the retreat, the communists struck a deal with a Hakka warlord controlling Guangdong province, Chen Yitang, and he let them pass through Guangdong. When the People's Liberation Army had its rank structure from 1955 to 1964, 54 came from a small Hakka county of Jingguo in Jiangxi province. So this is why Jingguo is known as the General's County, because so many generals came from this county, which is a predominantly Hakka county. So I think I've laid out pretty convincingly that the Hakka people are a distinct people in China, that China is not just one homogeneous Han Chinese population, but that there's this real tribal difference within China. Now, the Hakka are in a way a subgroup of the Han Chinese. They're a distinct subgroup. In the same way you could say Bavarians are a distinct subgroup of Germans, and that Bavarians, they have their own political party that's separate from the main conservative party. They have, I believe it's the CSU rather than the CDU. At many times in history, they've had their own kingdom, the Kingdom of Bavaria, and so there is a sub-identity in there. And they speak a slightly different dialect from other Germans. Now, we go back to 1850 with the Taiping Rebellion. The Taiping Rebellion was one of the deadliest wars in history, competing with World War I and World War II. Between 30 and 100 million people died. If you look at a surface level analysis, it seems to be this Christian cult, this heavenly kingdom, is the vehicle for the revolution. The idea of a Christian cult taking over and rebelling against the Qing dynasty. But if you look underneath, the leader of the Taiping Revolt, he was not just a Christian. He was actually a Hakka. His name was Han-Hakka. Han-Hakka was a Hakka. His leading generals and the people who followed him were predominantly Hakka. So the Hakka were rebelling against the Manchu establishment of China. Now, Manchus are not Han Chinese either. They're a separate tribe. They're a separate ethnic group. When the Taiping forces captured Nanjing, they made it their capital, and because they considered Manchus to be demons, they killed all the Manchu men and burned the Manchu women to death. So this was a racial conflict. It was an ethnic conflict. It was the Hakka people who were against the Manchu. They were against this Manchu rule, and they described the Manchu as demons, and they were committing genocide against the Manchu. The Zhuang people are of Thai origin, and over centuries, the Zhuang communities had been adopting Han Chinese culture. So the Zhuang language is not a Han Chinese dialect, but there was an integration between Zhuang and Han. And because of that, diversity plus proximity equals conflict, there was a friction between the Han and the Zhuang. There was a great deal of Zhuang unrest. Shi Dakai was half Hakka, he was half Zhuang, and he was part of the Taiping leadership. The Hakka and the Zhuang, they were at least 25% of the army, and there were many others of Thai origin who were not Zhuang. The idea that China is a homogeneous country, the idea that China is a monocultural country, the idea that racial issues are the product of Christopher Columbus and Marco Polo and Christianity. Well, I mean, Christianity was involved here, right? But the idea that racism and ethnic conflict is a purely Western thing or a white thing is just not true. And race wars, I would say, you know, if you include this along with World War I and World War II, these racialized wars, they are a huge source of conflict, and you can't ignore that. You can't just wish it away. And by putting a taboo on it and clamping down on it, people perhaps don't understand how important it is to an analysis of history. So, you know, China has traditionally not been racially homogeneous. Because of these wars, these massive wars that had a lot of people died, and actually China has become more homogeneous over time. It continues to become more homogeneous. But it wasn't always that way. And when we analyze history, whatever you think about present-day politics, you think we're in a post-racial world, you think race doesn't matter anymore. Race and ethnicity are clearly important to an analysis of history. And I do think that they impact our current politics. Who's voting for Trump? Well, it's whites of a certain background. And it's not all whites are equally voting for him. You can break it down by ancestry and ethnicity. So this is still important. It still impacts the current year, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's important to see history through this lens. So I hope you learned something. Of course, there's always more to learn about this topic, and I may be doing future videos to that effect. In any case, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.